Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the day two of our seminar. We are thrilled to have you with us again today as we continue this journey of learning, collaboration, and innovation with insightful discussion, engaging presentation, and meaningful networking opportunities. Thank you for your enthusiastic participation and contribution. आज সেমিনারের দ্বিতীয় দিনে আমরা সৌভাগ্যবান যে আমরা আমাদের মাঝে পেয়েছি মাননীয় অধ্যক্ষ মিলন মুখার্জি মহাশয়, ডক্টর সজল কুমার ভট্টাচার্য, ডক্টর বিভূতিভূষণ বিশ্বাস, ডক্টর তিস্তা দাস। আশা করছি আজকের পর্বে আমরা আরো বেশি সমৃদ্ধ হব ওনাদের জ্ঞান চর্চা এবং আলোচনার মধ্য দিয়ে। আমি রিকোয়েস্ট করবো প্রতিটি মাননীয় বক্তাকে যে আপনারা বক্তব্য শুরু করার আগে আমাদের এখানে প্রতিকৃতি রয়েছে মাননীয় ভাস্কর চট্টোপাধ্যায় মহাশয়, তিনি ভারত বিদ্যা চর্চা কেন্দ্রের মূল উদ্যোক্তা এবং প্রতিষ্ঠাতা। ওনাকে সম্মান জানানোর মধ্য দিয়ে বক্তব্য শুরু করব। এরপর আমি মাননীয় সৌমিত্র বাবু, ডক্টর সৌমিত্র রায় অনুরোধ করব অনুষ্ঠানের মূল বিষয় সমূহকে সূচনার মধ্যে দিয়ে স্যার প্লিজ।
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Trivenidevi Bhalotia College, the Department of English and the Department of Political Science, and Vidya Charcha Burdwan, we welcome you back to the second day of the two-day international conference on borderlines, redefining territories in a divided world. We are extremely happy that yesterday everything went on very smoothly and we had wonderful discussions and presentations. Today, before we start, may I please request Burdwan to come forward and felicitate, first of all, Dr. Shodal Kumar Bhattacharya, who is the Dean of Arts, Kazi Nazrul University Asansol, and Professor of English at Kazi Nazrul University. May I now request one of our student representatives to come forward and felicitate Dr. Vivian বিশ্বাস, Professor of International Relations at Central University. So, students, may I now please request Dr. Kumar Mondal to come forward and felicitate Dr. Tista Das, Assistant Professor of History at Bhalotia University. May I please now request Professor Ashish Chandra to come forward and felicitate the teacher in charge of Trivenidevi Bhalotia College, Asansol, Professor Vidya. Thank you so much. Okay, so it gives me great pleasure now to introduce to you all the first speaker of today. Dr. Shodal Kumar Bhattacharya, as I've already said, is Dean Faculty of Arts and Professor, Department of English, Passing Nazrul University, Asansol, West Bengal. He wrote his PhD thesis on family nation interface in Indian English with special reference to select novels of Salman Rushdie and Amitabh Ghosh. He was awarded a UGC fellowship for the research. He is also a recipient of the prestigious Charles Wallace Fellowship. His areas of interest include 19th century British literature, Indian and post-colonial literature in English, Bangla literature, eco-terrorism, and biopolitics. He has edited books, delivered talks at national and international seminars in India and abroad. But wishes to be remembered at the end of the day as a teacher who loves to interact with students and scholars. And on my behalf, as a community Chaudhary. So, ladies and gentlemen, now the floor is for Dr. Chaudhary.
সেমিনার রিভিউ দিয়ে বলার একটা সুবিধা আছে, একটা অসুবিধা হচ্ছে এনার্জি অন্তত 50% চলে যায়, শোনাটা কষ্টের। সুবিধার ব্যাপার হচ্ছে সেই সুযোগে যা কিছু বলে দেয়। No one will take this seriously. I really feel honored to have been invited for this talk. আমি চেষ্টা করবো অনেকটা বাংলা ইংরেজি মিশিয়ে বলতে, because students are here. Let me begin with a note of heartfelt gratitude on my part to one and all in Degree College and Bhalotia Charcha, who have been kind enough to invite me today with this opportunity to share my thoughts relevant to this 21st annual conference in Raniganj. I've been extremely honored for this invitation, and my heartfelt homage to Bharata, but ultimately it's because of him that we are here. The title of what I'm going to talk about is coming/going home. Within bracket IQAC, possibilities or impossibilities of mapping home across the borders. In his essay, The Theory of the Realms, published in the New York Review of Books in 2010, Tony Judt outlines the image of the 19th century modernity as he compares the unprecedented difference in time and space between the world of before and after the advent of the railway. The পৃথিবী যে বদলেছে তার প্রথম মাইলস্টোন হচ্ছে railway system. With its rapid movement of large numbers of people and goods over great distance, railways effectively reinvented both life and landscape. Before 1850, not many people knew what distant and unfamiliar places would be, and that the distance can be covered at a pace more than 10 to 15 kilometers per hour. But now, distance, now means after 1850, distance was more readily conquered, unfamiliar places were familiarity, and more importantly, time was reinvented. People's daily lives started to be organized according to the railway timetable in more ways than one. So far as landscape is concerned, the railway tracks caused cutting of trees, building of bridges on a large scale, building railway stations suddenly makes some villages or towns more important than others, reshuffling at a massive level the definitions of and the relations between the urban and the rural areas. In a word, the entire dynamics of the world changed.
Communities that accommodated themselves to its demands managed to flourish. Those that did not inevitably fell behind, bypassed by proactivity, information, money, and people. This is in and around 1850, and within less than 200 years of that, our concepts of time and space have undergone another major shift, now of a far greater magnitude. To put it briefly, as globalization fundamentally reorganizes life as we have known it, the most obvious attribute of this reorganization is the unprecedented breakneck speed at which this change is happening. Consequently, the numerous adjustments that need to be made in order to keep up or left behind or perish. Thomas Friedman gives a succinct, though a bit too positive viewpoint, account of this change in his book The World is Flat, published in 2006. The name itself is stated, not the world is flat. If it was railways in 1850, now the game changer has been the internet, and we all know how it has connected almost each and every individual of the globe. And every moment we are witnessing its political, economic, and social effects. Changes are inevitable. You may like it or you may not, but you cannot resist. And what is the effect? Generally put, borders, the physical ones, are no more impenetrable and opaque. They are becoming at least transparent, if not porous. But what does this mean for the diaspora? How is globalization reframing diaspora now? In a word, globalization has proved in this case to be a double-edged sword. Globalization has brought the world to fingertips to the internet, so one can stay in India and yet work for USA and earn in dollars. Such a globalization at Halloween. But at the same time, because of globalization, the rate of displacement has been accelerated. More people are on the move every day. With easier travel and increased opportunities, they are leaving their native lands with greater frequency and in larger numbers than ever before. Maybe they are forced to move because of the natural, that is climate disaster, political repression, war, and the like, or are lured to move with the rise of new job opportunities in multinational corporations or better education, etc. In either case, the net effect is the inevitable phenomenon of cultural transmission, crisscrossing of the globe by heterogeneous people, resulting in an increasingly complex, multicultural, multi-religious, multi-ethnic, polyglot world population. But there is a huge 48 font, all capital B huge. Here. Under this apparently general grand narrative, this movement, in its relentless, incessant nature, is generating a multitude of sub-narratives, each one unstable, specific to a place and moment, each a distinct narrative of memory, pain, and hardship. Closely juxtaposed to this multidimensional narrative is the narrative of the nation, with all its issues of territory and exclusivity. Just consider this paradox. Despite their need of foreign laborers to compensate for the decrease in their birth rate, European countries have set up protective measures, especially against undocumented migrants. Or think of the recent Rohingya crisis. Simultaneously, also consider how host nations are being challenged to come up with new legislation, educational and other civic opportunities, social assistance for this immigrant population. Standing on ground reality, it must be admitted that responding to this call
is not always without difficulty for host nations. What is the inevitable net result of these conflicting demands? The entire concept of nationhood and individual identity eating into each other. The new social reality, therefore, is something like this. While one end of the social spectrum may be rife with alarming xenophobia and hostility towards immigrants, legal and illegal immigrants, expressed by broad segments of host population, and on the other end, one may find something like a wholesale acceptance of the downside of global communication, which is fractured rather than reinforcing multiculturalism, as Jonathan Sachs points out in his book, The Home We Built Together, published in 2007, with minorities, claiming special rights and privileges. Sachs atrociously says that such claims poison liberal democracy. That is a liberal thing. I'm not going into that. Great scholars from the Department of Political Science. But somewhere in between, there is a struggle to come to terms with the implications of that condition. Where to locate your identity or home in this situation? Where do I belong? That is the question. Where therefore is home? This is a very sticky issue. Because as we all know, that home, for that matter, identity is a construct, and while it is an instinctive desire, one has to struggle very hard to build and consolidate. In this volatile, globalized world of constant movement and accelerating change, the construction of one's own identity offers in relationship with others, and thus in a state of constant flux. মানে তুমি যদি বাইরে থাকো তাহলে আমি যেখানে আছি সেটা হচ্ছে আমার ঘর। ঘর মানে কিন্তু শুধু বিল্ডিং নয়, emotional space. And the individual is situated at the center of concentric circles, as it were, where various institutions arranged in a hegemonic structure to this global intricacy, including his own nation, tries to include this individual in its granularity as a mind. মানে সমস্যাটা হচ্ছে আমি ছাত্রদের জন্য বলছি যে তুমি আছো, দেখো তোমার একটা কনসেন্ট্রিক সার্কেলের মধ্যে আছো, তোমার পরিবার, তোমার রিলিজিয়ন, তোমার ইকোনমিক স্ট্যাটাস, তোমার পাড়া, তোমার শহর, তোমার জেলা, রাজ্য এবং আলটিমেটলি তোমার নেশন, সবাই কিন্তু ক্রিয়েট করে তুমি তা। এগুলোর বাইরে তুমি নয়। তুমি যে মুহূর্তে জন্মালে তুমি চ্যাটার্জি, বোস, দাস, ঘোষ কোন একটা পরিবারে বিলং করলে তোমার কোনো স্বাধীনতা নেই। Right from day zero, there is something which is trying to create your identity. And place you as a minor in the granularity of that particular course. And the individual on his part is engaged in a titanic struggle to resist this onslaught on his identity by actively carving out the space called home that will consolidate his own identity. So in this era of globalization, the situation has become utterly infinite. Globalization has challenged nationhood by rendering the borders porous, and it has also challenged the traditional diasporic model of the home lost altogether in the diasporic condition. Consequently, in this new and dynamic worldview, the authenticity of all the concepts of home, host country, we and other have been considerably problematized. And along with it must be admitted, possibilities also have expanded. Equally problematized has been the concept of home itself, which is inextricably related with the evolution of the diasporic space. Following the publication of Bachelor's The Poetics of Space, which is a very famous book, the consensus seems to be that home and non-home are the basic divisions of geographic space as well as the psychic space. You need to belong to a home. A home কিন্তু তোমার বাড়ি নাও হতে পারে। এখন একটা ভার্চুয়াল হোম হয়েছে, তোমার হোয়াটসঅ্যাপ গ্রুপ হয়েছে, তোমার হোম কোথায়? তাকে তুমি হোম বলবে। Why would one coins a term tokokiria to signify the love and attachment one nourishes in one's psyche to a familiar snug space called home, and reiterates the necessity of this fondness to nurture one's identity. Many other people would point to the impossibility of securing this space. Home is nowhere, as many books suggested. Eventually, the contemporary condition in general, and the diasporic condition in particular, is resting on the tension between two specific modalities, being home and not being home. Let us now explore a little the contemporary diasporic struggle to build this home, to be at home as archived in literary representations. Though lately scholars have emphasized the ability of the diasporic subjects to recreate home in all unfamiliar spaces in today's globalized world, an ability which has largely mitigated their sense of being in exile, it does not yield equal success for all diasporic entities. Neither, in his book, Home, Identity and Mobility in Contemporary Diasporic Fiction, observes that diasporic narratives are not mere nostalgic lamentations. They rather attempt to actively redefine the migrant's sense of self and home, and attempt to reconstruct identity in new locations. But the fact remains that while there are instances of both real and fictional characters who succeed in actively redefining home in the most unhomely spaces by including some and excluding others, there are innumerable examples of people who are not so fortunate and privileged, and their struggle to create their home of desire ends up in perpetual failure, leaving these entities excluded and marginalized. Consequently, they are thrust into a condition of perpetual homelessness, and their urge to preserve their subjective self remains an elusive desire forever. Letters from Thailand is an epistolary Thai novel written from Thailand by Supa Sirising in 1969, which was translated later by Susan Baker in 1977. This novel is very interesting because this presents such an excluded character, Swan, who remains suspended all alone in a threshold between belonging and unbelonging, familiar and unfamiliar, here and there. Home is denied to him perpetually. Swan is an ambitious teenage runaway from his poor life in China to Thailand, where he dreams to achieve economic prosperity. He is not a forced diaspora and hence does not take much time to nestle himself comfortably in this new land. But as he gradually penetrates his roots here, he also suffers a strong nostalgia, fearful of losing his root Chinese identity. Like his innumerable Jewish, Mexican, and Indian counterparts, Swan alternately looks towards the new home, the new land promises, and is anxious enough to reconstruct the Chinese home he has left by following Chinese traditions and rituals assiduously and clearly excluding the Thai out of it. একটু করে চায়না সে ক্রিয়েট করছে একদম এখানে এসে বসবাস করে চাইনিজ কালচার চাইনিজ সবকিছু এটা একটা খুব কমন ডায়াসপোরিক ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক কিন্তু হলোটা কি দেখো শেষ that is how he hopes to resist high hegemony over his identity. In the process, Swan presents himself as the bastard child of nation. Poetry, Gayatri Gopinath had concept of the bastard child of the nation. Gayatri Gopinath likes to put it in an article, Bombay India, Yuva City, Bangla music and the engendering of a bastard child who is disavowed, inauthentic, illegitimate, and at best an impoverished imitation of the original culture, the host culture. But he could hardly resist high onslaught on his Chinese identity, leaving him to lament. One would say, I failed to live here as a true Chinese and raise a Chinese family. I could not shelter them from the thousands of daily experiences which made them another people, another race. There are so many of us Chinese here, yet the Thai have won. Yet this is not the end. Swan's experience in Thailand unmistakably points to an even further dimension in his diasporic existence. And the new change was coming over in Thailand itself. This change is so fast and all enveloping and so alluring that it leaves no one outside its sight. This is the lure of the West. The Western market economy, which has invaded the South Asian market in the last 60 years. Both the Chinese and now the Thai are easy prey to this market economy. For the time being, a sense of alienation corners Swan, but he is helpless in front of this vast economic colonization of the West that follows the indigenous identities of the Chinese as well as the Thai. So ultimately, how is one to map Swan's journey as a diaspora? From a Chinese home to a Thai home to a Western home. Swan has not arrived anywhere finally. He has merely reached yet another diasporic reaching point. This is the term used by Appadurai. The experience to moderate at large. You never arrive, you only move from one diasporic switching point to another. Therefore, the moment Swan boards his ship to China in his younger days, he chooses for himself a nomadic citizenship, onward journey from one transit point to another with no hope of return. This is perhaps the ruthless condition where the serial diaspora is laid. Now, coming to Salman Rushdie. Rushdie would present even a more dystopic scenario while speaking of the place of an individual in this globalized world. In Shalimar the Cloud, Rushdie presents the individual, irrespective of his nationality, and has been reduced to a pygmy figure across the globe and been caught up inextricably in the trap set up for him by the state, the globalized state, remember. I mean, even when you talk of India or this or that, it's a globalized India. India and globalized India are two different identities. So, you see what I mean? This individual now stands totally disenfranchised and homeless. Written 4 years after the infamous 9/11 incident, Shalimar the Clown is Rushdie's unmistakable attempt to underscore that in the long run, be it terrorism or anti-terrorism, the individual is finally a non-entity in this world. So there is no question of his or her being at home. Such a claustrophobic, dystopic scenario does not mark his midnight spirit. Rushdie himself categorically strays from the Indian talent for non-stop self-generation. That marks the end of the novel. This is even comparable to the mythologization of post-war Europe provided by T.S. Eliot in the Westland. But this trust in regeneration considerably wanes in shade the next novel when the condition of the individual has become pathetic because he or she has been trapped by the family as well as the nation. Shade brings no hope for Pakistan, an area of absolute darkness surrounds the country in the novel Shade. But in Shalimar, the feeling of unredeemed repression and suffocation intensifies as to expand its ambit to cover the entire globe. This is globalization at its worst. Borders of nations are withered, but withered only to trap the individual more sure. The state in shame has evolved itself in Shalimar in a cage where Shalimar is put into an immensely huge, intricate, inescapable machinery in which home or home country signifies nothing. Consequently, in this novel, having geographical locations spanning all over the world, অনেকগুলো জায়গা হচ্ছে এই novel, Los Angeles, Kashmir, Delhi, Strasbourg, France, London, they overlap with one another to engender an enormous palace of power, which is a labyrinth of interconnecting roots. As Vidya himself says, everywhere was a part of everywhere else. Russia, America, London, Kashmir. Our lives, our stories flowed into one another's, where no longer our own individual, distinct, the world was in longer calm. Sorry, the world was no longer calm. And how are these interconnecting rooms? They hardly provide any homely shelter, but they are windowless, windowless rooms, and there is an invisible door. So, not the claustrophobic, atmosphere. And even if somebody tricks his way past the monster in the first room, when there is and can manage to enter the second room, and he will have to enter the second room because that is where the road leads to. There is an even more ferocious monster waiting to gobble him up. So there is no respite, and mapping home in this matrix is utterly impossible. While talking about globalization, we often overemphasize the merit, as I pointed out at the beginning. But the zeal with which we talk about the possibility of crossing borders in this globalized world and the need of it gets dampened as we reach Shalimar Town with the realization that this crossing might not land us in a relapsing in paradise, but will only reduce us to mere clownish puppets in the hands of formidable, intricate global institutions. That's why Shalimar is the clown in the global ring of the 21st century circus. With no agency of his own, he is a laughing stock with no space to consolidate at his own. This problem of unholiness, is also apparent in Sri Lankan diasporic novels, for example. I would draw your attention to ask the students to read Roma Tierney's novel, Roma Tierney. Good read. Good thought should not Roma Tierney's novels demonstrate how amongst all South Asian diasporic communities, the Sri Lankan has been the worst victim. Disenfranchised equally at home and abroad. Moving out of the civil war ravaged Sri Lanka, these writers came from being assimilated by the West unquestionably. But post 9/11 this situation ruptured, and the European dream, was pathetically destroyed. So disenfranchised equally at home and abroad, they are thrust into a condition of perpetual homelessness and are doomed to live with anguish. Now, is this the only scenario? No. Amitabh Ghosh is one person who would not subscribe to this dystopian view. His world is people with characters who engage themselves in an irresistible quest for home, even when they are repeatedly uprooted from their homes, and are able to invent it in a transnational location. That is how they are able to combat the angst of diaspora. Home is everywhere, these characters will say, only it needs to be reinvented. Amitabh would therefore contest the concepts of fixity of home and focus on its fluid contours. Even in the Ghana, all the novels more or less say this. Even in Ghana Island, where most exhibits the problem of statelessness and homelessness, political as well as ecological home, on a larger global canvas, and bring together the Sundarbans, Los Angeles, and Venice to suggest the overlap. Those would like to invest on the interpersonal relationships that reinvent our home amidst all odds. Do you trust in the trust the law of humanity as the magic wand? Those of you who have read the Garden, remember the quote at the end of the novel, which, like Noah's Ark, has found a place for all the disenfranchised non-entities from across the borders. Eventually, eventually, this vote becomes a symbol of everything that is going wrong with the world. Inequality, climate change, capitalism, corruption, the arms trade, the oil industry, and the humanitarian obligations. The law of humanity, those hopes, will find a home against all odds posited by the state and its instruments. This rich, unshakable, almost poetic trust in the living world and life in capitalism is admittedly utopian and prescriptive. But that too is not without its merit. When the planet is becoming more and more dystopic every day, with the level of carbon monoxide rising to critical levels and the borders of the nation state becoming tighter than the noose, this utopian mantra motivates us to stay alive. This finds a definitive response in Ursula Hayes, a noted eco-critic, who believes that even though deterritorialization uproots people from their place of power and weakens the bonds of culture, this worldwide deterritorialization of both humans and non-humans invites in all human beings a sense of planet rather than a sense of place. আর তুমি ধরো ঘর থেকে বেরিয়ে যখন হাওড়া স্টেশনের মধ্যিখানে দাঁড়ালে তখন তোমার মধ্যে দুটো জিনিস কাজ করে দেখবে you are out of home, so there is an anxiety of being in a state of non-home, but at the same time হাওড়া স্টেশনে সব লোক হচ্ছে মানে তাদের কি সহযাত্রী, so that actually connects. That is what it means by a sense of planet rather than a sense of home, sense of place. Therefore, in the conclusion of a book, Sense of Place and Sense of Planet stresses the necessity of narratives that would strive to find effective aesthetic templates by means of which to convey a dual vision of the art as a whole and of the different arts that are shaped by varying cultural contexts. Such narratives, according to her, would find images for a new kind of cosmopolitanism, trace new connecting global patterns, and therefore help to map new homes even in this hegemonic global structure. This, of course, is another equally important standpoint in the project of such. So, what to conclude? Standing here as a citizen of the global south, I will say that we have, in this otherwise dislocated, fractured world, progress substantially in forging a workable network of South-South connections, but with a heavy price. We have lost the address of our permanent homes and are fated to accept perpetual nomadism. Talking about today's world, in the context of global south, John Cameron identifies the global south as an eccentric location. There is no center. A location external to self-appointed historical center. So we will have to map our homes if they exist at all in this decentered world. And in doing that, we have to admit that we are placed in a trajectory of trouble, a one-way trouble with no possibility and promise of return. Have we been rendered perpetually homeless? Some would say yes. I would say no. Because echoing Ghosh, I would say construction of home is an instinctive desire without which we cannot live. But we have definitely lost the fixity of home. Consequently, we can only go home. We cannot come back. আমরা বাড়ি থেকে বেরোনোর সময় কি বলি? আসছি। কেন বলি আসছি? যাচ্ছি বলতে নেই বলে দেখবে। মায়েরা সমস্যা করে যাচ্ছি বলতে নেই বলে আসছি। Because that only underlines the promise of your return. Now we have lost this promise. So you can go from one home to another with hardly any possibility of coming back. There is home going and no home coming. I have in mind, a remarkable novel by Yasi, Yasi. The name of the novel is, the title of the novel is Home Going, which is woven around this line of thought. Going home, or even mapping home, therefore, is an incomplete project, an ongoing project rather, of making and unmaking and creating. We stand today in the midst of.
There are quite a few people in this world who I know who never disappoint us with our presentations. Dr. Shadul Kumar Bhattacharya is one of them. Thank you so much, sir, for a very clear presentation. It is now my proud privilege to ask Mr. Ashish Chandra to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Trivenidevi.
Good morning, everyone. It is my honor and privilege to introduce our distinguished speaker, Dr. Vidya, Assistant Professor, Department of International Relations, Central University of Burdwan, Ranchi. He has 15 years of teaching and research experience. Dr. Fisher earned his PhD from the Department of Politics and International Studies, School of Social Science and International Studies, Pondicherry University. Before joining Central University of Bhalotia in August 2014, he has worked in many reputed institutions in various capacities, such as Assistant Professor in Department of Geopolitics and International Relations, Manipal University, Karnataka. He worked as a postdoctoral research associate at Center for Southern Asian Studies, Pondicherry University, and also worked as a project fellow, Rajiv Gandhi Chair and Contemporary Studies at Prayagraj, National and International Journal. He also contributed 28 chapters in edited volumes, 33 research papers. Dr. Fisher presented more than 60 papers in the national and international seminars and conferences. Besides, he has delivered several special as well as invited lectures in various universities and institutions. He has specialized in the field of Southern Asia and Bangladesh policy. Now, I would like to invite Satya. Thank you very much for this. And I must admit that it is a very excellent presentation. I don't know how much you have been able to connect with this presentation because it was very high and rich in terms of the content. Thank you very much for enlightening with your deliberations, and I hope the students will enjoy it. So, and I would like to thank this college for inviting me and giving this opportunity to interact with all of you students. And obviously, first of all, I'd like to thank the teacher in charge of the college for sending these invitations and other faculty members, and then Bharata Vidya Charcha Kendra. For that, today we are here together. Obviously, the Royal Secretary of this faculty members of the Department of Political Science and Department of English seminar. And obviously, my dear students, this is for other faculty members. My fellow panelists, Dr. Shabal Kumar, Dr. Kendra, and Dr. So, when I was going through the concept note of the seminar, it actually heard well. And today morning I saw a poster. I don't know how many of you noticed that poster outside the office. Delegates, and on that, two birds are sitting. So which is very excellent. I don't know who actually generated this idea, but the idea itself is very. There are so many small things that actually will provoke your idea and provoke you to think in a different way out of the box. So when I saw that one, then I understood that today whatever I'm going to talk, definitely people will come. Because my topic is displacement learning. The impact of displacement on cultural identity among migrant communities is not. Since a student of international relations, I connect with this topic. And gradually, you will get to know that somebody who is speaking in front of you is basically more related with this topic. And it is very close to my heart and close to my home. Because I am offshoot of the refugee and the classes happened in Indian Pakistan. Basically, I belong to Andaman Nicobar Island. Why I am there? So, Earth is there. So, as you know that poster itself defining that only humans are having various barriers and all other species on the earth do not have. They need barriers. So when humans are living with political boundaries, it itself actually putting you so much of terms and conditions of your living. As Professor Sandhu sir, when he was delivering lecture, he just mentioned a book name, Earth is Flood. If Earth is flood, then why there are so many countries that we have created? And we must think about everything. Mind sitting over here. So this paper actually provoked me that we could do when got the invitation back to saying that the main title of this seminar is what redefining political landscape in the United States. When the title itself is saying that if we are living in a world where so many divisions, divided politically, and if you narrow down the divisions, that will come down to caste, religion, race, and gender, which is very much affecting your day-to-day life. Obviously, sir has given a lot of information. There are so many books he referred, data and other things. So that actually impactful relations that I'm going to also elaborate on that. You mentioned statelessness, migration, then cultural identity, where when philosophy and politics come together, that creates politics, that create a kind of pipe through which you can understand that you exist. So when a person can understand, so I will try to speak little Bangla also. Though I'm not comfortable in Bangla, though I'm a Bengali, that will gradually understand that what is cultural identity, that impact statelessness, or when person become refugee, how that culture actually gradually impact. And then you or somebody will become a hybrid kind of citizen. You belong to where? You belong to neither. ये बात में हिंदी में बोला जाता है धोनी का ना घर का ना घाट का वो जो है बीच में लटकते रहते हैं तो my language also like that if I speak Bengali you will love because though I am a Bengali but in my home only I speak Bengali when I go out of my home you mix up with Bengali Tamil Telugu Malayali Hindi Marathi many other languages. And when I came to South India for my study, that is Pondicherry University, from where Jairam, you were one of your faculty member here in the department, he was also very brilliant, so he called me Bhaiya. I basically, in Bihar, if you go anywhere, they will call you Bhaiya. So when I came there, though my friends were from Tamil, from Telugu and all, but I was not able to follow even a single word of them. Though your friends and others were from that community, but even though you were not able to understand the language. And the Bengali, either you are Bengali, you are Marathi, you are Hindi speaking and all. कुछ जो है ये कम्युनिकेशन या साउथ इंडियन के लिए ये कोई मैटर नहीं करता आपको एक ही आइडेंटिटी से वो एक ही चीज से वो आइडेंटिफाई करेगा कि यू आर हिंदी का that means those who speak any other languages rather than Tamil Telugu or Indian languages all are Hindi speaking and you see that itself you are losing your identity language. So when we are talking about the human rights, when we talk about the human rights, basically we are talking about that you should have the right to live with dignity. And your entire dignity is depends on your language and culture. If your culture and your language harmful, then you can show, you can see that will be another next Bangladesh. Bangladesh, single country is there in the world, created only because of the language. Urdu was imposed on Bangladesh, whereas Bengali people, 99% people they speak Bengali. They were not aware about the Urdu. Urdu was imposed as the Bangladesh was its part. So there are so many other benefits of it. The language was the trigger point from where the Bengali nationalism started there in Pakistan, East Pakistan. Today that is now presently Bangladesh only because of that. So I will give you certain data to understand the entire scenario of in South Asia. If you look at the Bangladesh condition, the stateless population in Bangladesh, that is Rohingya and then Bihari and many other people there in Bangladesh, it is more than 9,52,000 people. They are stateless. Stateless is migrants, refugees, and stateless. That's a thin line you can define. जो इंटरनेशनल जो लॉ होता है इंटरनेशनल लॉ We recognize refugees, but it won't recognize the stateless people. Let stateless people be. So stateless people is basically legally they are not recognized in anyone. They don't belong to you. Sir was again, he was defining, and he was saying that when you are living from your home, मान ज्यादातर बोलते होंगे, if you say, "Vidya," तो खबर बोले ना, ये so, that is sense of belonging that creating your identity. That many of you maybe grow up in the college, they came from other parts of Bengal or many other parts. छुट्टी होने से तुरंत आपके भीतर हमेशा ये होता है कि छुट्टी आ रहा है मुझे जाना है। लेकिन आप ये बिहार में और एक कहावत है, तेरा और घर। तेरा जो है उससे बोला जाता है जहाँ पे आप रेंट लेके या आपके जन्मभूमि को छोड़ के किसी और जगह पे गए वहां पे आप तो वहां पे जो है बिहार में इसको तेरा है। तो जहाँ पे हम रहते हैं वो जगह आपका होके भी नहीं है। और ह्यूमन का जो है कि आप किसी को भी अगर आइडेंटिफाई करता है कि ये लोकल है या नहीं, फर्स्ट यू आस्क टू दैट पर्सन आपका जमीन कहाँ है। अगर उसके पास जमीन है तो सोचो उस जगह का वो लोकल है। If that person is saying I'm living in a flat or in a rented home, the person definitely belongs. So when you are living from your home, your mother is asking you, don't say, that means that it is home itself is giving you kind of a creating identity. And that identity that you have to carry throughout your lifetime. If you lose it, if you lose this identity, and then there will be a kind of no existence of it. So statelessness is bad. There are so many other aspects of life, aspects are there, and dimensions are there. Of this statelessness, migrants, refugees, there are varieties of reasons. बहुत सारे reasons हैं जिसके लिए आप या stateless बनते हैं या migrants बनते हैं। बांग्लादेश में 9,50,000 people are stateless. They are not recognized by any government. Rohingya is one of them. And then Bihar is lot of Bihar. Many other tribal groups. So which is actually a sort of state. And then in Myanmar, you have 6,30,000 people are stateless. We are just talking about the South Asia and little extended part. Talking about the Middle East and Europe and Africa and many other parts of the world. So Myanmar, it is more than 6 lakh people they are scared. And in Pakistan, 7,75,000 is estimated. People are homeless, stateless. They do not have any country. Don't belong to any country, but it belongs to the humans. When we are talking about humanity, it belongs to the world. When you are talking about globalization, आज के दिन में हम हमारा जो है knowledge जो है वो globalized. The knowledge is everywhere now through internet, through different means of communication. You get access of the knowledge. The whole world is talking about the peace, stability, and global citizen. When we are talking about global citizen, then the phrase and the book name, the world is blurred, needs to be utilized practically other than theory. And when Trump is saying that, then presently it comes down to the present scenario between India and Pakistan. This fire already happened between these two countries. Third party is giving this information through social media that between Pakistan and India, I read it about the person, the Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam. That I am the Uncle Sam who actually, brought these conditions of ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Because I have to do, and they have to do a lot of business. So market globalization is only because of this market profit. And some countries in the world, they are just struggling for their own survival. Go to Kenya, the part of Africa. Not only that, you go to in our country, any other states, and in the district, we do not have the basic facilities, not even a fresh water, no land, no road, no electricity, no school, no healthcare. So in that condition, when we are talking about the global citizen and the global market, it becomes null and void for a person who is sitting there in Parliament. You heard, maybe some of you watch a movie called God is Great. God is Great. It's a movie. So, मैं ये चाहता हूँ कि आप लोग ये YouTube में भी अवेलेबल है. Yes. Any problem? He has come. He has come. It is necessary that will create, that will boost up your energy. As rightly he pointed out in the beginning that sometimes it will become more problematic because you can't connect with your audience. But it gives you again the opportunity to escape many things and you can speak into whatever you want. So we are in that phase. So no worries. So it is okay, fine. And Pakistan, as I said, that 70 lakh, more than 70 lakh people are state. From where this state will be from? When the world divided into two groups, that is your socialist versus capitalist, they utilized and they used time and again this Afghanistan for that to pursue their ideology. Capitalist or that is your communist ideology is more superior than the democratic ideology. So they created these refugees, Taliban, made Mujahideen, whatever you are seeing today, it is all these are of the policy of the West. And Soviet Union and today they are talking about human rights. If they want to interfere in any country's domestic affairs, they talk about human rights का अंकिल शैम. आपको याद रखना है कि अंकिल शैम आपके ऊपर जो है कॉल करता है. तो हमेशा जब हम डिक्लेयर 1975 में इंडिया डिक्लेयर हुआ, उसके बाद 1998 में जो है पोखरण हुआ, उस समय भी हमेशा जो है हमारे ऊपर कॉल करते रहता. लेकिन हमारे जो है बहुत supremely they have calculated everything and then finally black point था. एक मूवी भी देखना चाहिए इसमें जो है व्हाट रियलिटी उसमें दिखाया था. तो उसमें जो है सक्सेसफुली जो है वो न्यूक्लियर कॉन्टैक्ट किया एक्सप्लोजन कंडक्ट and then we began nuclear 11 countries and that is the problem in the but whether threat is Russia or that you remember one should be thankful to Russia. Today, whatever you are seeing, the IIT, NIT, and your IIM, AIM, and other ISRO, and DRDO, everything is established by them. So, no, in international politics, there is a concept there is no permanent friend and permanent enemy. And since we are having more than 1.4 billion people, that is our duty to get access of resources from where we can get it very cheap. So that the present government is and that our external affairs minister doesn't come very quickly to England. When Russia-Ukraine war still going on. That time India became quite an exporter country. So India is not a India कभी जो है वायरस को नहीं है अभी भी नहीं है। लेकिन उस समय हम लोग वायरस को करते हैं ऐसे पूरा सैंक्शन इसको इम्पोज कर दिया रशिया का ऊपर कि आप जो है गैस वैस जो है कोई भी यूरोपियन कंट्री जो है खरीद नहीं खरीद लेकिन उनका जो है जो डेफिसिट है वो कैसे पूरा so and then what happened is it's trade to India जो है good oil खरीदा the world and India become exporter of oil. So you see that in the big countries, those who are having the world aspiration, the global aspiration, कि हम लोग को ही control करेंगे, they have many other ways to business with each other. खाने का दाल अलग अलग. तो जो आज के दिन में जो रेफ्यूजी देख रहा है, ये क्लाइमेट रेफ्यूजी होता है, ये और रेफ्यूजी होता है, ये फोर्स रेफ्यूजी होता है, रिलीजियस रेफ्यूजी होता है. There are many varieties of our type of refugees out there or escaped people out there. And then in Bhutan also, you see, the Bhutan is one of those countries in the world, they don't calculate GDP, gross domestic. Rather, they calculate the gross national happiness. It is a very good concept. And they follow it. And they are carbon negative country, Bhutan. But even though they have more than 1 lakh status refugees sheltered there in Bhutan. And obviously in Nepal you have another 8 lakh. Just think about this region. How much stateless people are. This is all data. You will find it in the United Nations or human rights organizations, those who are working on that stateless of migration aspect. So you will find this data over there. Then there are so many these countries like India, 1952, इसमें जो है आपका citizenship का provision है, but country cannot provide each and everyone citizenship. इसमें जो है आपको 12 साल रहना पड़ेगा, हमारे देश में 10 साल रहना पड़ेगा, and you have many other papers and all. That means a good person with good number of money, amount of money, you are having, you are carrying that very easily, you can become a citizen of India. So, and then in Bangladesh also, it is that whether they are in a position to give citizenship to Rohingya, to those Biharis, those who at the time of their partition, stayed there. And those people, those who are migrating now from Bangladesh to India, you are in position to give citizenship to them. The government of India came out with the idea last year. So under that condition, there are how many of these people they got citizenship in our country? It is all political citizenship. Just without any citizenship, proper citizenship, you will be given a Aadhaar card, you will be given a voter ID card. It is political citizenship rather than the country's citizenship. So which is actually follows the conditions in the constitution. And then these things, why these things happen? So what are the main reasons? What are the aspects that country they deny to these people? First of all, education. Not get a proper education. When these Rohingya people they migrated, before they migrated across Bazaar to Bangladesh, I happened to be there at my study area in Bangladesh. So I went there with the help of the Ministry of External Affairs of Bangladesh, that is a think tank, Bangladesh Institute of Strategic Studies. I went to Bangladesh and then went to Cox's. And the condition I saw was just after 7-8 months later. I think that how many lakhs of people they are living in a very unhygienic condition. And what I found is that females have around 16, 17 or above. Most of them are pregnant. And during pregnancy, you require a lot of medical aid and sanitary pads and many other things. You will require. So nothing is provided to them. They are living a condition that you will see, and you will find that you will feel yourself that yeah, since I'm also a person of human, and they are also human, but they are living in human. That's why at the very beginning I started with the idea that first of all other species on the earth they do not have any boundaries. They can live and they can sing, they can dance, and then they can live wherever they want. In real sense, they are the global. Siberian birds. During winter, they are they are going to those places, even in Andaman or Islands, you find different types of birds that migrating from East Asia, from the Middle East, from many other parts. They are coming, the birds are coming. We must understand and we must think about that in real sense, with other species on the earth, they do not have any problem. They feel that the earth is. So in that condition, the education is denied to them. They cannot also take the time to remind you. And then the language. Tell you about the language. I will take my example. Have you Bengali background? I speak Bengali properly. When I went first time to Kolkata, my Dadaji's home, my father's maternal, I was watching a TV, in kind of Hindi, a Bangla movie, something with girl. Akshay Kumar they बोले अक्षय कुमार. ऐश्वर्या राय is नहीं करेगा ऐश्वर्या राय. I was so surprised and I was so why it is Akshay Kumar but it's saying Akshay Kumar and then she is Aishwarya Rai but it's saying Aishwarya Rai and person is the same but name is different. So I was not able to connect because my Bengali and this Bengali is totally out of the world. So you see, though I am a Bengali, I was not able to connect. And my culture, my religion, my other kind of things is gradually, decline. In Andaman and Nicobar, you will find that hybrid kind of celebrations of every festival. In real sense, where in the mainland, and Andaman they consider themselves the islanders. समुद्र से घिरा हुआ है, beautiful place. तो आपको वहाँ कभी कभार जाना चाहिए देखने के लिए. Such a beautiful place and beautiful people because that island was Burdwan island. Settlement वहाँ पे दिया गया कि वहाँ से पहले से कोई था नहीं. जितने भी सेटलमेंट दिया गया, चाहे वो किसी भी गांव में आप जाएंगे, वहाँ पे बंगाली मिलेगा, तमिल मिलेगा, तेलुगु मिलेगा, पंजाबी मिलेगा, मराठी मिलेगा, बिहारी मिलेगा, उड़िया मिलेगा, तेरे गाँव में. इसके अंदर भी आपको हिंदू मिलेगा, मुस्लिम, क्रिश्चियन, ईसाई, एवरीथिंग यू विल फाइंड इन वन प्लेस. तो जब वहाँ आपको किसी भी सेलिब्रेशन जो होता है, in any celebration, you will find that every people from every sect they come together and then they celebrate and it is the people those who are from mainland they are going there they feel so offended. ये हिंदू का पूजा में मुस्लिम क्या कर रहे हैं? जैसे मेरे गाँव में कोई भी दुर्गा पूजा जो है होता है, तो शायद जो होगा कोई मुसलमान जो है उसका रेस्पेक्ट करता है. यहाँ हो जाए पॉलिटिकली जो है आपको तो ग्राउंड बन जाएगा, ब्लड शीट का ग्राउंड बन जाएगा. वहाँ होगा लेकिन वहाँ negative is the positive aspects of oneness or unity and diversity, but other thing is that you gradually you are losing your identity, your language, which is actually creating a tough and dumb. He or she will lose gradually the confidence, gradually language and culture. If you lose your mother tongue and your culture, and then finally what will happen? You will feel all the time insecurity. You will not find your own place you are good. तो जब मैं अंडमान से जब बाहर आया तो then it happened to me. Because there itself I was not given that space to flourish my own identity and my culture and my language. हम बंगाल में पढ़े नहीं, बोलना भी तो बहुत लिमिटेड था. जब साउथ में आ गए तो हम कम्युनिस्ट भी गए, बंगाल से सभी होते हैं. जब बिहार इधर आ गए तो इलाहाबाद में आ गए, फिर झारखंड आ गए तो हिंदी भी और बहुत बढ़िया. तो पीपल ऑफ अंडमान हिंदी, बट दैट इज मोबाइल टाइप ऑफ हिंदी, not Hindi speech here in the UP, Bihar and other parts of Hindi speaking region. So gradually you lost your identity, which is actually creating lots of this statelessness. So the country will, some country will recognize you as a citizen of that country, but they won't assure you to flourish your own culture and your language. You won't get the opportunity of learning things on your own. So which is actually sort of state of this people. So as I said that some people and some countries they are having aspirations of global power, becoming global power, and some countries they are actually struggling to survive. These people actually became stateless because of this big powers. आपको पॉलिटिकल साइंस जो लोग पढ़ते हैं, इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन जो पढ़ते हैं, आपको देखा जाएगा हमेशा 3 लेयर्स होता है. एक जो है कोर होता है, वो पे जो है डेवलप्ड कंट्री, एक जो है सेमी पेरिफेरियल होता है, उसमें जो डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज जैसे इंडिया हो गया, साउथ एशिया का कंट्री, और एक जो है पेरिफेरियल कंट्री जो थर्ड लेयर पे होता है, वो है अंडर डेवलप्ड. अफ्रीका जैसे कंट्री हो गया, लैटिन अमेरिकन कंट्री हो गया, वहाँ पे कोई सुविधा नहीं है. उसमें क्या होता है, by default these two peripheral and semi-peripheral countries, by default they have to supply their resources to these 4 countries. And if you reduce supply of your resources to those 4 countries, and then you will find this Ankesha to say that the human rights violation is going on. So I am the savior of all the humans. And they will enter in your country. Like for example, you see, take the example of Afghanistan. 20 years recently they fought war. आपको पता है क्यों जो है ना रशिया ना अमेरिका कभी वहाँ पे वॉर जीत ही नहीं पाया. कारण क्या है? ये जब आप कहीं भी यूट्यूब में अवेलेबल है, जब तालिबान टेक ओवर कर रहा था, वो वीडियो आप देखिए. तो तालिबानी जो था, यदि 100 or 200 चप्पल पहने हुए हैं, वो तालिबानी जो था वो जो claimed by America that they are the supremely they are having all technology and the military is the supreme military in the world, उसको चेत आउट क्यों कर पाया? क्योंकि जो तालिबानी जो होता है, जैसे एक मॉनेस्ट्री जो बुद्धिस्ट मॉनेस्ट्री होता है, उसके नीचे ही गांव होता है, मंदिर होता है. तो ये कानून ये है कि किसी ना किसी फैमिली मेंबर को आपको मॉन्क बनने के लिए आपको भेजना पड़ेगा. इस तरह से जो अफगानी भी जो है वो क्या करते हैं, इसी फॉर्मूला को यूज करते हैं. बच्चा को देना है, आपको देना ही पड़ेगा, वरना आपका पूरा फैमिली को एलिमिनेट. तो जब वहां से लेके जाता है, उसके पास कोई कॉन्शियस ही नहीं, धीरे धीरे उसको जो है बोला जाता है वन टारगेट ऑफ किल पीपल एंड ऑल आर एनिमी इन फ्रंट ऑफ यू. जब किसी को जो है ओरिएंट किया जाता है उसी कैलकुलेशन के साथ एंड उसी ओरिएंटेशन के साथ, यू हैव किल एंड देन यू विल, तब आपको जो है जन्नत मिलेगा. द करप्टेड वर्जन्स ऑफ द करप्टेड वर्जन ऑफ द रिलीजियस स्टेट उनके जो है दिमाग में गया. उनको जो लग्जरी आज के दिन में हम लोग यहाँ एंड सोसाइटी का ये हमारे लिए कहाँ बैठे. अगर इस लग्जरी को हम कभी एक्सपीरियंस ही नहीं किए तो मेरे लिए कोई गर्मी हो, कितने बारिश ठंड हो, आई विल नॉट फील. तालिबान के साथ कंडीशन बस सही. जब पहली बार वो राष्ट्रपति भवन में जो है जो आए सारे तालिबान के साथ देखिएगा वो जिंदगी में पहली बार जो है वो सोफा के साथ उस तरह का लग्जरी और जीवन में कभी इसको मिला ही नहीं। तो उनका टारगेट इसीलिए जो है वो डेटोनेट हुआ ही। पर्सन जब गरीब था तो बहुत आइडियोलॉजी का बात है, जब पैसा वाला हो जाएगा तो आइडियोलॉजी जो है वो छोड़ के वो और जो है आप शोषण करने वाला बना। तो जब आपको आइडियोलॉजी ही आपका जो है वो लग्जरी ही नहीं जीवन में दिया गया, टारगेट इज वन एंड रिलीजियन इज ओपियम के जैसे काम करता है। कॉम्बिनेशन यू सी इज डेडली। चप्पल इस सब 50 रुपया 60 रुपये का चप्पल पहना हुआ है, लेकिन द वर्ल्ड के सबसे पावरफुल आर्मी को चेज आउट कर दिया अपनी कंट्री से। सोवियत यूनियन को भी वहां बाहर वो लोग देख दिया, कोई भी इसीलिए वहां पे वॉर जीत नहीं पाए। और माउंटेन वॉरफेयर आसान नहीं होता है, अमेरिका का माउंटेन वॉर रखा है। अब चले जाइए वियतनाम में तो माउंटेन वॉर और जो है तो गोरिल्ला वॉर अमेरिका को वहां से भी तो ये जो है अंकल सैम टाइप लोगों के लिए जो है आज रेफ्यूजी यहाँ पे वॉर में जो लड़ाई हो रहा है इसके लिए है। आप यूरोप या अमेरिका रशिया जाएं वो अदर कंट्री तो एक साथ रह सकता है, बट एनीवेज देखिए आप नॉट टेक मच टाइम। तो इसके बाद आपको जो है सिविक्स पार्टिसिपेशन है वो लूज हो जाता है। इफ यू लूज योर स्टेट योर लैंग्वेज योर कल्चर then आपका जो है आइडेंटिटी बिकम लाइफ एंड reconstruct and you will feel you are in exile, so which is actually dangerous for the world. Today we are talking about the foreigners entering in our country. Where they will go? They do not get any facilities. Rather, every day they have a sense of a kind of sense that there is a feeling that any time we will be. We are, we are concentrating on a concentrated time. Gradually, they are moving from that India to other parts of India. You will find India there in Kashmir, you will find Rohingya in West Bengal, you will find in Assam, you will find in Tripura and many other parts. And they are ready to accept any kind of punishment from the government. At least government will recognize stateless. That impact your cultural identity and that actually kill your own self. That is more dangerous for all. One more thing I said and then I will my thought. And today warfare in the world, what is happening? Now Russia is having outsourcing the war, they are outsourcing the soldiers. It is a very dangerous process of fighting war. Offer दे रहा है कि आप आओ हमारे साथ लड़ो, आपको जो है हमारे मिलिट्री में फैसिलिटीज मिल रहा है, आप लड़ाई लड़ो हमारे दूसरे में वही लड़ रहे हैं, अमेरिका भी वही कर रहा है, चाइना भी वही करेगा। तो सारा देश जो है अभी जो बड़े देश है वो आउटसोर्सिंग करने लगा है अपना मिलिट्री, हायर करते हैं उसको, ट्रेन करते हैं उसको, आगे ले देता है। आफ्टर दैट once war is over you are you on and then another Taliban, Mujahideen, another type of organization will come out as like Muslims in the religion, which is more dangerous than the young people sitting over here. It is your duty to take, it should be very much political rather than apolitical. To question your government, questions of all governments, and they have to deliver the good governance rather than creating problem on the name of human rights. So thank you very much for giving this opportunity. So thank you.
Thanks, sir, for the very insightful on the background of political and civil. Dr. Bhalotia, he has previous commitments, so sir will be leaving now. would like to take this opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Tisha Das. She is an associate professor of history at Bharata University, where she has been teaching for 9 years now. Prior to her present appointment, she had been working the WBES from 2009 to 2016. She did a PhD from the University of Calcutta and had been an alumnus of both the University of Calcutta and Presidency College. Dr. Das is a widely published researcher and has received academic acclaim for work on partition, refugee problem, nationalism, migration, and gender. It gives me immense pleasure to call the class.
I'm the last speaker for lunch, and this is a seminar organized by the Department of Education. So my position is out of scope for all kinds of things. But there is also something very nice about this, because I have speakers before me that are more British like I cannot thank TDB College and Bhalotia Charcha for letting me speak, for giving me this space, this time, and সেই বিষয়টা নিয়ে আমরা এতক্ষণ ধরে কথা বলছিলাম, সেখানে নানা ভাবে বর্ডারের আলোচনা হচ্ছে এবং নিশ্চয়ই তোমরা আলোচনা যারা শুনেছো সেখানে বর্ডার নিয়ে নানা ধরনের কথা। আমি যে পেপারটা করতে চেয়েছিলাম আমি সেটার নাম দিয়েছিলাম বর্ডার লাইন এবং সেখান থেকে পলিটিক্যাল মোবিলাইজেশন এটা আমার বিষয়। আমি প্রথমে যেটা বলে নিচ্ছি বর্ডার লাইনার কেন সেটা নিয়ে আমার ধারণা নানাভাবে আমরা চর্চা করছি। We don't need a particular kind of body. We need different kinds of body. Children need the body in different ways. We all know that the mind is part of the body. It needs the mind. So if we're talking about the importance of the mind, we see what we had said last month in the science of তাদের যেটা সুবিধা হলো আমাদের এই মাইন্ডের পক্ষে ভাবতে গেলে নানান জিনিসের সাথে কনফিউজ হবে, সেই ধারণাটা নিশ্চয়ই আমাদের এতক্ষণে স্পষ্ট হলো অনেকটা। যেখান থেকে আমরা বুঝতে পারলাম যে এভরি পার্সন তারা যে কোনো মানুষ রাজা আমরা বলি পলিটিক্যাল ক্যানট বি এবল। সেই জায়গাটা থেকে দাঁড়িয়ে আমি যদি পলিটিক্যাল মোবিলাইজেশন অফ দ্য রেফিউজিজ আমি আশা করছি সেখান থেকে একটা ব্রডার ভিউ অফ পিপল হু ইনহ্যাবিট বর্ডার ইন ডিফারেন্ট ওয়ে, তাদের মেন্টাল ম্যাপ, এই সমস্ত নিয়ে আমরা একটা জায়গাতে পৌঁছতে চেষ্টা করতে পারবো। প্ল্যান মোরাল কিন্তু আমি আমার স্পেসিফিক কনটেক্সটে যদি আসি সেখানে আমাকে এটা প্রথমে বলে নিতে হবে যে since we work, many of us we work on the partition and even the partition story for many of us is one of survival against all odds. এখন victory মোডের একটা লেন্স নিশ্চয়ই পাই তখন এটা রেফিউজিদের for golden reaction subhuman position তাদের কিন্তু victory মোডের লেন্স সমস্যা আছে আমরা জানি যে যারা victim হয় ওদের কোনো we save them, we rescue them, we don't ask them. তো সেই জায়গাটাকে রাষ্ট্র নিশ্চয়ই জিজ্ঞেস করে না করতে মন বেড়ে অবস্থাতে ওই রিকভারি প্রোগ্রামের যে সমস্যা যেটা পাঞ্জাবে ভীষণভাবে এই জায়গাগুলোতে তো আমরা দেখতে পাই। কিন্তু এটা নিয়ে কথা বলবো যে যখন we try to recreate our home, whatever that is, do it kind of we don't have a home, not কিন্তু when you think about homes, সেটা recreation যখন আমরা fluid identity সেটাকে কোনো না কোনোভাবে একটা শক্ত জায়গাতে আমরা রাখার চেষ্টা করি। The state is also fine doing it. The state is doing this by defining the border. Border at the strict village with a long term for refugee identity is exactly at this point becomes only which is why whenever we talk about refugee politics, আমরা যদি দেখি সেটা the identity of a nation বলবো না state, সেই রাষ্ট্র ব্যবস্থা যেভাবে দাঁড়িয়ে থাকে যেই বর্ডারের আলোচনার দাঁড়িয়ে থাকে সেটাকে রেফিউজিরা আমার। So there is a fundamental difference. There will always be a fundamental difference employers and বিভিন্ন লেখা করতে রাইট পারসন স্ট্র্যাটেজি পপুলেট সমস্যা সেখানে একটা আলোচনা। So if we talk about this recreation of the home on this side of the world, ছাত্র বিশ্বের পরে যারা এলেন এখানে থাকতে শুরু করলেন, ক্যাম্পে অনেকে রইলেন যাদের অন্য কোনো ব্যবস্থা ছিল না, অনেকেই পরবর্তীতে একটা জবরদস্ত started spotting the spot of following came up. আমি কলকাতা এবং তার আশপাশটা নিয়ে মূলত concentrating my discussion on that, which is a limitation in program. কিন্তু আমরা জানি যে এটা পশ্চিমবঙ্গের মেজর সমস্যা যেটা আমরা জানি যে এই মাইগ্রেশনের শেষ দেখা, অর্থাৎ আমরা পাঞ্জাবের ক্ষেত্রে ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ থেকে যদিও 3 বছরে মোটামুটি একটা রেস্ট্রিক্ট করতে পারি অবস্থান দেখছি, বেঙ্গলের ক্ষেত্রে have never been able to do that. So for us all, the idea of the border is a constant challenge, এবং সেই চ্যালেঞ্জটাকে আমরা বিভিন্ন সরকারকে দেখেছি থ্রেট হিসেবে আমাদের কাছে। This is not a challenge, this is a threat, this is a finding. So we see officer থেকে শুরু করে মোটামুটি আরো next 2 decades তারা এনে তাদের রাজনীতি concentrate on the experience of women, suddenly talking about refugee women and their social condition. This is my point. By the 1950s, French battles of refugees had started. 46 একটা হয়েছে যখন তোমরা জানো very clear. তোমরা জানো যে যখন 46 বিভিন্ন জায়গাতে রাখছি বিহারের এই সমস্ত কিছু কনফ্লিক্ট একটা বড় মাইগ্রেশন অলরেডি শুরু হয়ে যায়। বড় শুরু কম নেক্সট ইয়ার দেখা গেল few years ago, 1 year. 47 এর নিশ্চয়ই আরেকটু মাইগ্রেশনের মধ্যে 50 মেজর দাঙ্গা হলো এবং সেখান থেকে একটা বড় মাইগ্রেশনের ট্রেন্ড দেখা যায়। So fresh batches of refugees have started arriving in Mexico, and never seems to be honest that border crossing would remain with independent nation. Independent nation কথাটাকে বলছি is not baggage. We know what it involves. We know they did a state as a fourth house. আমরা দুটো ক্যাম্পের মধ্যে আমরা এমনভাবে করবো যেখানে নিজেদের পায়ে দাঁড়াতে পারে বার্ষিক পরিকল্পনা। So this independent mission, it had to deal with this work. Work among refugees there can become an important plank of the political life of West Bengal. So it is within this larger scale of such political work that the movement of women for women have found its niche. So this is a small corner which I will touch on. It must be remembered that through these women, political activists, social workers, the kind of politics which is suitable for the refugees is the need. এই শব্দটা আমরা ব্যবহার করছি not minor. এই শব্দটা আমরা যখনই যে কোনো পুলিশ ফাইল ইত্যাদি যখনই সেখানে আমরা শুনি যে ইনফিলট্রেশন একটা অনুপ্রাণ প্রবেশের একটা ধারণা। Anyway, so this kind of politics which is suitable for the refugees is infiltrated the camp. The community is dominated Mahila Afterwards Committee, which is called MARS, M-A-R-S, Mahila Afterwards Committee. It had been already formed in 1942. Now, 1942-43, as we know, was the period of acute economic crisis. The question which would come up is why women needed a self-defense again. And Vidya Mujumdar, Manduri Devi, Rika Molli, Apna Banerjee, Shobha Bhoi, Ashwamala Devi, Ila, all of them go part of the march. They declared in a joint statement published in the Shukti Group on 23rd March 1951 at a press note. Shekhar Kanadi believed the march was formed at vote with a view to safeguarding the interests, prestige, and rights of women. They were talking about women's rights. And there are specific women's rights that they were talking about. So it was believed that since the formation of the league, the food, I quote again, the food, cloth, and various problems which confronted the Bengali women had taken serious action. So this is why the Mahila Committee was formed. By the 1950s, this refugee crisis had taken such proportions that it became impossible not to include the agenda of an organization of the refugee problem within an organization like the MARS. What came to find its place in this discussion was, again I quote their booklet, refugee camps in West Bengal where millions of women refugees had to live abominable lives. Through such work, the identity of the refugee woman was gradually being crystallized. And it is this crystallization which I think of. Crystallization খুব সহজ কাজ না। এবং এই ধরনের আইডেন্টিটি ক্রিস্টালাইজেশনের ক্ষেত্রে we are talking about homelessness. There are different kinds of homelessness. যে ক্যাম্পে থাকছেন তিনি কলেজে থাকছেন এক নয়, স্টেশনে যাচ্ছে হচ্ছে আন্দামানে করে পাঠানো হচ্ছে বিভিন্ন ধরনের যে হোমলেসনেস হোমলেসনেস এগুলো এক কথা। So what brought this identity, what crystallized this identity was that kind of homelessness. This identity created its own space across stations, camps, and colonies in the city. The kind of work that the march was involved in made mobilization of the grassroots. Such work would help in the political indoctrination of the refugees along community. এই যে indoctrination-এর কথা আমরা বলছি, এখানে কিন্তু এখানে উপযোগের শব্দটা হচ্ছে infiltration. কিন্তু indoctrination by itself is not as bad as infiltration. Indoctrination-এর মধ্যে এমন একটা ঘটনা কিন্তু থাকতে পারে যেখানে একটা অধিকার সম্বন্ধে সচেতন করা একটা প্রচেষ্টা সেখানে থাকবে। আমরা এখানে যেভাবে গল্পে করছি বা করা হচ্ছে সেখানে কিন্তু এই ধারণাটা। What needs to be remembered, however, is that the shape that the women's movement took, a less political or more social, I would say. It was not accidental. This was to be more broad-based, so to speak, and more inclusive. It primarily addressed women's problems, and since even in Europe, children remain the primary charge of women. The problem of infanticide, the need to provide education to children, these things were acquired legacy. আমরা এখানে মার্কেট বলে যদি দেখি লেখা যদি মার্কেটটা পত্রিকা সেটা যদি দেখি সেখানে কিন্তু বারবার এই প্রবলেমগুলো নিয়ে So women's roles are those responsible for running the house and nurturing and caring for their children. Were coupled with the roles of being the breadwinners of them. The scarcity of nutritious food for children became more issue. The demands that the women's movement brought forward becomes a way of understanding the gendered roles that the refugee women were to play as they were trying to rebuild their lives. আমি একটা ছোট একটা ক্যারেক্টার করে শোনাই, একটা সিপিআই পলিটিক্যাল একটা ডকুমেন্টারি ছিল 1952 একটা অংশ। এটা নাম ছিল দ্য টাস্ক ফর দ্য উইমেন মুভমেন্ট। একটু পরিষ্কার করে বলে কি করার কথা উইমেন মুভমেন্ট আন্ডার দ্য সিপিআই। The women's movement has to be a multi-class movement or organization and cannot be a one-class organization. Generally speaking, calls for strikes, struggles, or economic issues should be the task of the trade unions. Trade unions and Kisan Sabhas and working women as members of the TUs, Kisan Sabhas, can and should participate in this work. But generally, the class demands should be taken up by the women's organization when such demands have become the common consciousness of the rules and the norms of women's organization. So this then was how the women's movement was supposed to function. High politics was not enough. What they would get involved in was what would be seen as social, community work. The sphere of women's politics therefore remains separate. Women's politics, male politics. Therefore, they would appeal to, they mentioned the common consciousness of the people, which could be anything, umbrella. It was through such an inclusive movement that communist ideologies would gradually penetrate the minds of the refugees. In the narrative of communist infiltration, the work of these women is to be noted. They talk of working towards establishing an equal status for women with men and of constructive measures. Constructive measures to reform the system of they would provide a training ground for women, organize regular classes, provide relief to distressed women, establishing study circles to improve, again, the requisite mental equipment of the women in population. This became part of their agenda, along with, I put again, pressing the government for the introduction of compulsory family education. They also talked of introducing permanent relief measures for the distressed and molested women of and also of saving education from the influence of religious dogma. Both that ideological framework broad-based movement to because two class lines for them. Along with specific demands, women were to take an active part in all their women's day for a long time. Trade union নেতারা সেটা চাইছিলেন এবং mass organizations were the class-based organizations like trade unions or organizations like that. So the language of politics of these people, theirs was the language of providing relief. It should be remembered in this context that already in January 1944, the Aegis had been formed, which included representatives from mass, and the main thrust of the organization again was relief. It was different from what their male counterparts practiced. It was probably due to this difference in the language that this movement could translate itself. Therefore, we are able to integrate Bharata it would translate itself into a social reform and cultural movement with ease as and when the need for it. The movement did not try to find difference from the Australian and the Australian. It also talked about something which included everything. So it was related. Therefore, when the possibility of the march being declared illegal arose, there were plans to carry out work for apolitical association. As I mentioned, apolitical is not a word which I don't know, I don't understand really. The Women's Cultural Association was to be one such association. It is not coincidence, therefore, that the CPI, when the CPI went underground, the women's section functioned sewing school for women, classroom. One such sewing school on Cornwall Street was the center where communist women gathered regularly, and many of them were dedicated to making box collections on behalf of the People's Relief Committee from the local box collection. Women like Onukoma Chakraborty, who became the organizer in charge of the South African Project, worked towards spreading communist ideology among students when the CPI went underground. But it had a smooth functioning, which is another kind of a network in the social. Many of these women had family ties with the communist work and worked in close association with them. If I amplify a special branch which is defined, কিভাবে এই মেয়েদের কথা বলা হচ্ছে আইডেন্টিফাই করা হচ্ছে আমি একটু একটা জাস্ট আমরা বাতিয়ে দিই সময় অভাব একজনের কথা বলা হচ্ছে ম্যারিড গার্ল নেম রেন ages about 24 years of dark complexion and a resident of Joshua, who lived in Raniganj, Bhalotia, was a seasoned communist worker and one of the group leaders in the unit of the party. Her brother was connected with the CPI and the government. Onukoma Chakraborty, was the associate of Mrs. Formal Bose of the communist Bose family in Burdwan. The question therefore comes up in this context is whether women's participation in politics was the result of familial and vocational ties and early development. It must be remembered that even when such ties were not at work, the kind of politics that the communist women endorsed was once approved by the party line. Therefore, the fact that work on different language of protest was not always merely a response. Community program inherited to the structure that was আমরা কিন্তু সবসময় দেখো ধরনের কোনো রাজনীতি এটা একটা নিজস্ব So once you start that the ball rolling, it has its own speed. It needs to be acknowledged therefore that spontaneity bred a kind of success in the project of political mobilization that is and the notion of the need of the art is not lost. It was possible to be female activists to unify issues like child protection with the problem of in May 1955, the March, in collaboration with the West Bengal Committee of the National Federation Vidya, issued directives for the Children Protection Week from 25th May to 1st June. Along with this, initiatives were taken to popularize World Women's Conference for Peace. Women activists brought forward the problems of the government program of the recovery of abducted women. In February 1955, the Nikhil Bharat Mohila Sammelan, or India Women's Conference, highlighted the absurdity of the project of recovery of women who had been settled in their homes for long. It was pointed out that bringing them back to the involved separation of their children. Recovery of the media function. Mass members worked among some relative categories. These women had been here access because of the kinds of issues that they took up. The problem of unemployment being an important one is at the beginning of the 1950s, knowing that the women come out with better for their families, unemployment became their problem. The last women to therefore focus their attention specifically on the unemployment problem of middle class. তাহলে একটাকে এই তাদের অ্যাড্রেস করা তোমার বলতে এইরকম বলে সেটা বুঝতে কিন্তু একটু সময় দিতে পারে ফলে আনএমপ্লয়েড মিডল ক্লাস that was their problem. The activists said this, the mothers and sisters, they appeal to women to fight against the eviction of refugees and the introduction of technical education to women. Training women became an important part of them. The প্রশিক্ষণের কাজটা কিন্তু তারা এমন সময় করতে পারে যখন পার্টি আন্দোলন it was hoped that this was primary school for children but also activist spaces where mothers did work. It was hoped that this would help in developing political consciousness of the people, particularly the household women. From the 8,000 middle class women that is the household women, তাদের 8 lines এর মধ্যেই আমরা so it is to these household women that we now done. The mass audience that come out of the body by day. It published an article on the life of the Fiji women, Namchula Children married to women, which actually begins by putting a rhetorical that a refugee woman comes. প্রশ্নটা এরকম ঘরের বউজিরা যদি রাস্তায় ঢুকে পড়ে বেড়ালো তাদের জীবনে আর কি থাকতে পারে তাহলে প্রথম আইডেন্টিটি বউজি কেমন By this time, one must remember that women have become a conspicuous presence. They would work, beg, gather food also in the afternoon, and it was the time of the dinner of that time. However, their primary identity remained the bodies of both. It is this identity that bred a kind of sisterhood that was usually translated into they became refugee women, decrystallization of Okambala, and this brought them together. The word most commonly used for the hardships that they suffered was Shonga. The word highlights the fact that the narrative of the partnership was one of survival. Shonga could solve Shonga one way and as long as the struggle was on, there was hope. In this story of struggle, the plight of women is honored. সম্মানই তোমরা জানো বড় অনেক সেই সম্মান যেটা একটা শরীরের একটি পার্টিকুলার জায়গা বলতে পারে সেখান থেকে পারিবারিক সম্মান সেখান থেকে কমিউনিটির সম্মান সেখান থেকে নেশনের সম্মান যার কারণে কোনো পোস্ট ব্রেক জীবন আর সম্ভব নয় ওই রিকভারি পুরো আইডিয়াটা আপনি যারা বলবেন সেটা থেকে হচ্ছে But this honor is under threat. Women have been the containers, the holders of this honor of the minority community. Now they are responsible for keeping up, not simply keeping up, not simply conserving, but also putting up a show when necessary. The middle class notions of morality and values, and also for keeping some semblance of the normal, quote unquote, life alive. These stories of struggles frequently come beyond Shongram. Invariably involve stories of how women took up the responsibility of running that house. Gathering food was not enough. The demand for fuel was high, and it was almost always in short. এই প্রবলেমটা আমার মনে হয় একটু বেশি আমাদের একটু হওয়ার আছে জায়গা আছে যেখানে আমরা ফুয়েল নিয়ে একটা আলোচনা করি আমরা ভাবি যে গ্যাসিং ফুড দ্যাট ইজ হাউ টু কুক দ্য ফুড এই যে কাজটা থেকে মানে যে কয়লাগুলো ব্যবহার করা হয়ে গেছে সেখান থেকে গুণ তৈরি করে নতুন করে তৈরি করা এটা যখন মিলে যাচ্ছে এবং স্টেশনের আশপাশে মেয়েরা যারা থাকতে রেফিউজি একটা খুব ঝুঁকির একটা লাইন অফ ডিউটি সেরকম তারা কিন্তু দুপুরবেলা এই কাজ করবে in camps and colonies which were near railway lines, women went out to get pieces of used coal to make them reusable as fuel. It was not easy to get these pieces of coal from the ash dumps, the railway shed. Since there were not too many women, this also involved fights and wars. It was in such an effort that between 1952 and 56, at least 3 elderly women, refugees who had lost their husbands and who were technically without male heads, আমাদের সরকার সরকারের মধ্যে এই শব্দটা আমরা women without male heads, that a permanent liability can be part of this part. They were killed under the wings of cement. What led to the indelible mark on the memory of the partnership was the hardship in Shongram that these middle class people have to endure. মানে অন্যান্য কথা আমরা বলছি আমরা এই ক্ষেত্রে they are specifically talking about the middle class people. এটা আমাদের একটা বড় নিয়ে ভাবনা ছিল। Women of Bhalotia করতে walked miles to reach the fields of Shamanoor, Kumar Shakti, Pakuli, and Mushikpur to gather powder, which should be used for food. Since they would not afford to buy donkeys or any other kind of food, their only option was to give up their a bukete long-term, which is common, and after Shambhav both for them to become that. I will try to bring this together with the kind of protest that is being involved. The presence of women in demonstrations to make us making it difficult for the police and government officials to use physical force to disperse the crowd. One instance might be to use as an example of the way women on the front line of the usually করে বাচ্চা নিয়ে এবং হাউসহোল্ড ইকুইপমেন্ট মহিলা ইত্যাদি সমস্ত দাঁড়িয়ে থাকতে ছিল যে হয়তো নিজের প্রথমে শরীররা দাও and this is the picture you know that the most vulnerable people সরকার ও কারণে এখানে আছে in the early months of 1957 when the United Central Refugee Council (IQAC) organized civil disobedience movement to protest against the government move of sending refugees outside West Bengal. The police rounded up the protesters under the West Bengal Security Act. And Bhalotia, as police started using tear gas to disperse protesters, women started collecting the tear gas. Which had not worked effectively to haul them back. These women, transformed the area between the Purus and Bhalotia on the one hand and the Raniganj Bonda railway line on the other into a veritable facility. It is in the same camp that protests against the supply of gas quality cars, which came to acquire the character of fight against the government authorities to secure all the refugees who classified as their. These regular fights became symptomatic of the bargaining leadership, which would set the structure of the refugee movement. In this movement, as the demonstrators of the Bhalotia gathered in strength, the government declared the convocation of more than 3 people illegal under Section 144. As news spread that 15 police trucks had arrived surrounding the protesters, women of all ages started gathering in the central field and south of the slogan. The middle-aged women, more than 200 of them, came out with brooms in hand to face the tear gas shell, while another 200 young girls formed the second line of resistance in buckets of water. We are currently supposed to initiate negotiations. Okay, age planning the organization of bringing out women, the way you bring them out, it has a specific structure. This is the Bhalotia. In the end, one must turn to the problem of how these women protest are behaved. আমরা যদি একটু জিনিসটাকে আমাদের টেক্সট হিসেবে পড়ি আমরা কি বলবো এই জিনিসটা হচ্ছে wording of this and that rules দিয়ে বেরিয়ে আসা how do we read that how do we read it we should remember I think that these movements are not so activated আমরা যখন করি স্বতঃস্ফূর্ত আন্দোলন আমরা এটা আমাদের দেশের সেটা কাজ করে সমস্ত অর্গানাইজেশনের অভাব এবং আরেকটা কথা যেটা আমরা বলি সেটা হচ্ছে যারা স্বতঃস্ফূর্তভাবে আন্দোলন করে তাদের একটা সারণ্যের আলোচনা আমরা করি সরল মানে কিন্তু বোঝা আমরা কিন্তু সরল নিশ্চয়ই পাই তো সেই জায়গা থেকে it is not so that is the first thing that I think a framework of leftist organization activity therefore a pattern was being set however this pattern was not set in isolation from everyday life as women came out to protect their basic living conditions the nation's homes they lived in the food they received as support from the government their lives as much as their bodies became the factor. From a মানুষগুলো যদি আমরা বলি স্বতঃস্ফূর্ত এই পলিটিক্যাল আন্দোলন homes became political which needed to be protected against regular eviction operations. They became a band of women forming the front line of babies and household utensils became their head. It is this everydayness that needs to be traced when it comes to the brand of activism that these women endorse. আমরা ইন্টারপ্রিটেশন শব্দটা ব্যবহার করি আমরা অন্যদিকে এন্ডোর্সমেন্টের কথা সাধারণত অ্যাকশন দিচ্ছি সেটা আমরা না করি আমার মনে হয় এই একটা work for refugee women and refugee women who raise their voice to keep their lives on. So not very far removed. In life. It would be encouraging to chart the lives of these women and those inhabiting borders of it. আমরা এই লিমিনাল আইডেন্টিটি কথাই আপনারা বলছিলাম। This work defines the border, most importantly, the one between the home and the world. এই হোম আর ওয়ার্ল্ডের কথা যেটা আমরা প্রথম শুনছিলাম, যেখানে বারবার আমরা এটা খেয়াল করছি যে হোমটা যদি ডিফাইন করতে হয়, তাহলে তার আউটসাইড যারা নন হোম কালচার সেটাকে আমাদের ডিফাইন করা হবে। অর্থাৎ সেই জায়গাটা থেকে হোমের আইডেন্টিটি home, as we know, does not exist as a pure form. নানাভাবে থাকছে সেই আইডেন্টিটিটা। কিন্তু সেটা এই বিভিন্ন সময়ের যে নন হোমগুলো সেগুলোর ডেফিনিশনে হয়তো এই ইউনিটটা বিভিন্ন মুহূর্তে একটা ক্রিস্টালাইজেশন হয়। This is the crystallization of the identity that I was trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kisharas. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. It's been very hot and stuff. So we'll come to the end of the first session for the second day. We were supposed to be having Dr. Shruti from Bharata University, Odisha. Fortunately, she's very sick. She's not it's strong, and therefore we will not be able to participate at this international conference. So what we'll do is that we'll break up for lunch in the moment, and we'll come back in Toronto. 120 in this room for the are there any questions for the students on any country because if there are questions, okay. I don't think so. So just end this session. We come back at 1:20 for the paper presentation schedule and. So we'll just break up for lunch. Thank you so much everyone for your attention and this.